Weddings have always made me nervous, not because of commitment or formality, but because they're like glass houses, beautiful, delicate, and prone to shattering without warning. This one was no exception. It was a warm spring afternoon, the kind that makes you think life can't possibly go wrong. The ceremony had ended an hour ago. Guests were milling around the garden, champagne flutes in hand, their laughter fluttering like lazy butterflies in the air. The photographer was still busy snapping pictures of the newlyweds beneath the old oak tree, its gnarled branches dressed in strings of white lights. I was leaning against a stone balustrade near the reception hall, watching my wife, Mallory, as she adjusted the bride's veil for a final portrait. She looked radiant, poised, every bit the bridesmaid you'd want beside you on your big day. The pale lavender of her dress set off her tan from our recent trip to Maui, and her long auburn hair caught the sunlight like it was made of copper strands. She was laughing, the real kind, the kind I used to hear more often. I sipped from my glass of bourbon, letting it burn its way down my throat, and tried to shake the unease I'd felt all day. It wasn't jealousy. I trusted Mallory. Or I had. It was something subtler, harder to pin down. A shift in the air, the tension that precedes a storm. The groom, Jake, had been my college roommate. We weren't best friends anymore, but we'd stayed close enough to get invited to each other's weddings. I liked his bride, Sophie, sweet, no nonsense, and smarter than Jake deserved, if I'm being honest. And then there was the best man, Logan. I hadn't known Logan well until the bachelor party a month ago. He was the smooth, charismatic type, always the center of the room, always with a story. I didn't like him. He had that aura of someone who had nothing to lose. He and Mallory had danced once at the rehearsal dinner, a little too close for my comfort, but I brushed it off. Paranoia, I told myself. Weddings made people overly sentimental. Now, watching her across the lawn, that paranoia crept back in like smoke under a door. Mallory caught my eye from across the crowd and smiled. I raised my glass in return. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. I let it go. The reception kicked off just as dusk painted the sky in strokes of violet and gold. The tent was strung with Edison bulbs, glowing like fireflies in jars. Laughter, clinking glasses, and the occasional shriek of someone dancing barefoot on the lawn floated in the air like echoes of a perfect night. I lost track of Mallory for a bit. She said she was going to check on Sophie's dress, something about a snag in the hem. I believed her. At least, I tried to. I drifted through the crowd, catching up with a few old friends, politely dodging questions about when we'd be having kids. Mallory and I had been married for 3 years. We'd agreed to wait. Or at least that's what we said in public. Then someone tapped my shoulder. "Hey, I think you should see something," said a guy I barely recognized. Greg, I think. A cousin of the groom. Short, nervous energy, the kind of guy who fidgeted with the rim of his drink until it bent. "What's up?" I asked. He hesitated, looked over his shoulder, then pulled out his phone. "This might be nothing, but you should see it anyway." He handed me the screen, and the world stopped spinning. There, in grainy but unmistakable clarity, was a photo of Mallory, her back against the stone wall near the side terrace. Logan's face buried in her neck, his hand on her waist, sliding under the fabric of her lavender dress. The timestamp was recent, less than 20 minutes ago. I felt something inside me fracture, quietly, like a plate dropped onto carpet. No sound, no scream. Just the soft, sickening realization that something once whole was now broken. I handed the phone back to Greg, my hands trembling. "Where was this taken?" I asked, my voice hollow. "Near the north wing. Outside the coat room." I didn't mean to spy. I was just coming back from the restroom and saw them. Snapped the pic before they noticed. "Did they see you?" He shook his head. "No. I got out of there fast. I didn't know what to do. But I thought you should know." I nodded. "Thanks." That was all I could say. Anything more, and I would have shattered completely. I left the tent and walked toward the edge of the property, where the garden sloped down to a grove of trees. The lights and laughter faded behind me. My heart pounded against my ribs, each beat like a question I couldn't answer. Why? Why here? Why him? Why now? The grass was damp beneath my shoes. Somewhere in the distance, I heard the soft strum of acoustic guitar from the DJ's break playlist. A wedding guest chuckled drunkenly. The world spun on, oblivious. I tried to tell myself it was a mistake. Maybe it was an old photo. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe. But I knew Mallory's dress. I knew that wall. I knew Logan's smug posture. And I knew that smile she'd given me earlier wasn't real. I wandered until I reached a stone bench beneath a lantern. I sat there, watching moths dance in the glow, the bourbon now bitter in my mouth. Memories flashed through my mind like shards of glass. The way she looked walking down the aisle on our wedding day. The mornings we spent wrapped around each other, laughing over coffee. The night we promised we'd never lie to each other, no matter what. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. I wanted to storm back into that tent, drag them both into the light, and burn down the whole illusion. But instead, I sat still, calculating. Logan, the best man. Mallory, the cheating bridesmaid. How poetic. They thought they were being clever, discreet. They had no idea who they were messing with. Because this wasn't just infidelity. It was betrayal, staged in a place meant to celebrate love. A holy space, defiled. And I was going to make sure the price they paid would be unforgettable. As I stood, the weight of everything settled into something sharper. Not sorrow. Strategy. I pulled out my phone and opened my notes app. By the time I returned to the tent, I had already written the first 5 lines of my plan. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But what they don't tell you is how meticulous you have to be to prepare that dish just right. No screaming. No violence. No spectacle. Just precision, patience, and timing. By the time I walked back into the tent, I was no longer the husband who had just seen a photo of his wife pressed against another man. I was something colder. Focused. Mallory was at the far end of the dance floor, sipping white wine and laughing at something Logan whispered into her ear. Their heads were close, closer than friends needed to be. Her hand brushed his arm lightly, fingers grazing in that way that could pass as nothing to the untrained eye. But I knew her tells. I'd memorized them over the past 3 years. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was hiding something. The way she bit her lip when she thought she might be caught. She was doing both. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Not even when she glanced at me, her smile faltering just slightly before she turned back to Logan like I was a stranger in a crowd. Perfect. I turned my attention to the wedding party. I needed information, movement, patterns, and more importantly, I needed allies. Not the kind who knew me, but the kind who saw too much. The photographer. She was young, mid-20s, short platinum bob, practically glued to her camera the entire day. If anyone had accidentally caught more than they were supposed to, it was her. I found her by the catering tent, fiddling with her lenses. Hey, I said casually, you get some good shots? She nodded. A few great ones. This venue is a dream. Mind if I see a few? I asked. She hesitated, probably not wanting to hand over her work. So I pulled out my wallet and slipped her a 50. It's for my wife, I lied. She was one of the bridesmaids. Want to make sure she's in a few good ones. That did the trick. She handed me her camera. I flipped through quickly, pretending to smile at the group shots until I found what I needed. Background images. Dozens of them. One in particular made my stomach twist. Mallory and Logan, in the garden, just outside the tent. Her heel lifted slightly, as if she were leaning into him. His hand casually resting at the small of her back. Too intimate. Too familiar. I handed the camera back with a tight smile. Thanks. These are great. That gave me timeline confirmation. From Greg's photo to the photographer's candid shots, the evidence was stacking up. Back inside the tent, speeches began. Jake stood first, glass raised, thanking everyone for being part of his special day. I watched Mallory from across the room. She clapped politely, but her gaze kept drifting to Logan. The second toast was from Logan himself. The best man. And there it was, his performance. He made jokes about Jake's terrible taste in beer, teased him about college pranks, and threw in the standard, "You're lucky to have found someone who tolerates you" line. Everyone laughed. Even me. But I wasn't laughing at the joke. I was laughing because Logan had no idea what was coming. After dinner, the dancing started. Mallory found me finally, sliding up beside me like nothing had happened. "There you are," she said, brushing her lips against my cheek. "You okay?" I met her eyes. "Yeah, just been watching everything." She tilted her head. "Everything. Every little detail," I said. "You look beautiful tonight." That made her relax. She smiled, kissed me again, and said she was heading to the powder room. I watched her go. Logan followed 5 minutes later. I gave them 15. There's something surreal about sneaking around a wedding venue like a detective in a film noir. The hallways were dim, lined with flower arrangements and forgotten jackets. I moved quickly toward the side terrace where Greg had taken the photo. They weren't there, but the coat room door was slightly ajar. I crept closer. Low voices. Breathy laughter. I didn't open the door. I didn't need to. I pressed my phone against the wood panel and recorded for 2 minutes. It was all I could stomach. Then I stepped back, straightened my tie, and returned to the reception with ice in my veins. The rest of the night passed in a blur. I didn't speak much. I danced once with Sophie, the bride, who hugged me and thanked me for coming. Her perfume reminded me of simpler times, of college days and nights when nothing felt permanent. Mallory found me again toward the end of the evening. She wrapped her arms around me, a little too loose, a little too warm. "You've been quiet tonight," she whispered, breath tinged with champagne. I smiled, just taking it all in. She leaned closer, pressing her lips to my ear. "I have something planned for us after this." My skin crawled. "Can't wait," I lied. We drove home just past midnight. The streets were empty. The air was thick with silence. Mallory leaned her head back against the seat, humming some songs still stuck in her head. I kept my hands at 10 and 2 on the wheel, eyes fixed on the road ahead. She didn't notice my silence anymore. Maybe she was used to it. Maybe it gave her room to wander. Back home, she stripped off her dress and dropped it on the floor. I watched her from the doorway as she disappeared into the bathroom. The dress pooled like a puddle of lavender silk. I picked it up, folded it gently, and placed it on the chair. She returned, wearing one of my old t-shirts, and kissed me again. "Come to bed," she murmured. I did, not because I wanted to, but because tomorrow I was going to burn her perfect little world to the ground. The next morning, while she made coffee, I emailed myself the audio clip from last night. Then I transferred the photographer's candid images from her online gallery, still public, still innocent to everyone else. By lunch, I had a folder on my desktop titled June Wedding Unedited. Inside were photos, voice recordings, screenshots from Greg's phone, and the wedding itinerary with timestamps. Evidence. Enough to destroy her carefully curated life. Enough to expose the affair without a single word from me. But that wasn't the plan. Not yet. She didn't deserve simple exposure. She deserved performance. And the perfect stage? Sophie and Jake's post-honeymoon brunch. A week from now, with the entire wedding party in attendance, including Logan and Mallory. A gathering of friends, family, and fragile truths. I RSVP'd yes. The days leading up to the brunch stretched long and tight, like strings wound around my ribs. Each one hummed with quiet tension. I went through the motions, smiling at Mallory over morning coffee, kissing her forehead before she left for work, listening as she told me about the errands she'd run or the phone calls she'd made. All the while, I cataloged each lie with the calm of a scientist observing a slow, controlled burn. I never mentioned the coat room. Never said a word about Logan. I wanted her to believe I knew nothing. That I was the same husband she'd betrayed, blissfully unaware, tucked safely in the shell of our routine. But inside, I was sharpening blades. On Tuesday night, I created a new email address under a generic name, Event Feedback. June Wedding at. From there, I sent the damning folder, photos, recordings, everything, to myself, then saved it to an encrypted drive hidden deep within a folder titled Vacation Ideas. On Thursday, I printed a few key photographs on glossy paper, ones that showed Mallory and Logan too close, too familiar, in too many moments across that wedding weekend. I slipped them into a plain envelope, sealed it, and placed it in my dresser drawer. Friday passed like a whisper. Saturday, I rehearsed. And on Sunday morning, as sunlight streamed through the windows and the scent of Mallory's French toast filled the kitchen, I looked at her and thought, this is the last day you'll smile at me like that. The brunch was scheduled for noon. A casual, post-honeymoon celebration at Sophie's parents' estate, sprawling, ornate, and painfully perfect. Mallory dressed in a soft blue blouse and fitted skirt, curling her hair into loose waves. "You look great," I said, tying my own tie with deliberate care. "You too," she replied, adjusting my collar. "I'm glad we're going together." So was I? The estate was already buzzing by the time we arrived. Laughter spilled from the patio where tables had been arranged under tall white umbrellas. Waitstaff floated through with trays of mimosas and tiny hors d'oeuvres. Jake and Sophie greeted guests at the entrance, both sun-kissed and glowing from their honeymoon in Santorini. "Glad you guys could make it," Jake said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Wouldn't miss it," I replied. Mallory hugged Sophie tightly. "You look incredible," she said. "That island air suits you." Sophie smiled. "We needed it. You know how crazy wedding planning is. I'm just happy it's over." We mingled for a while, moving from group to group. Logan arrived about 15 minutes later, wearing a pressed linen shirt and mirrored sunglasses. He greeted us with that same smug confidence I remembered from the bachelor party, as if the world owed him something simply for existing. Mallory's eyes flicked toward him as he passed. Just a second, but I saw it. And more importantly, I saw him look back. She leaned toward me a little too suddenly. "I'm going to check out the garden before things get crowded," she said. "Wanna come?" "Go ahead," I said, sipping my drink. "I'll be here." She hesitated, then walked off alone. Logan waited 5 more minutes before following. I waited 6. Then I followed too. The garden was quiet, shielded by tall hedges and the gentle hum of distant voices. A winding stone path led to a small fountain flanked by marble benches. I spotted them just before they saw me, Mallory and Logan, standing too close beside a rose arbor. Her hand was on his chest. His fingers brushed her wrist. They weren't kissing, but they might as well have been. I stopped, just far enough that they didn't notice me. Mallory said something I couldn't hear. Logan laughed. I pulled out my phone, took a photo. Then I turned around and walked back to the patio. When I returned, Sophie was speaking with the caterers near the buffet. I made my way to her side. "Hey," I said softly. "Can I talk to you for a second?" "Sure," she said, smiling. "Everything okay?" I nodded. "Just a small thing. Can we go inside for a moment?" Her brows furrowed, but she followed me into the sunroom that opened off the patio. I closed the door behind us. "I'm really sorry," I said. "I didn't want to ruin today, but there's something you need to see." I pulled the envelope from my jacket pocket and handed it to her. Sophie opened it slowly. Her face didn't change at first. Then her fingers tensed, eyes scanning the photographs one by one. Her lips parted slightly. "Is this Logan?" I nodded. She flipped to the last image, Mallory and Logan in the garden from just moments ago. "I took that 5 minutes ago," I said. Sophie stared at it for a long time. Then, quietly, she said, "Thank you." She didn't ask questions. She didn't cry. She just folded the photos and tucked them back into the envelope with the precision of someone making space for a storm. "I'll handle it," she said. 15 minutes later, she did. The speeches had begun. Jake was thanking everyone again for coming. Sophie stood beside him, radiant in her sundress, a mimosa in hand. "And now," she said, stepping up to the mic, "I'd like to say something too." She smiled at the crowd. At first. Then her voice turned calm, steady, and sharp. "Weddings are beautiful lies, sometimes. They ask us to believe in perfection, in love that never breaks. But what happens when the truth slips through the cracks?" A few people shifted uncomfortably. Sophie didn't blink. "I want to thank everyone here who made our day unforgettable," she continued. "But I need to extend a special thanks to Mallory, my bridesmaid, my friend." Mallory froze mid-sip, wide-eyed. "Thanks for reminding me that the worst betrayal never comes from strangers," Sophie said. "It comes from the ones who smile at you while they sharpen their knives." A stunned silence fell over the gathering. Jake turned to her, bewildered. "Sophie, what?" She held up the envelope and dropped it on the table. "I saw the pictures," she said coldly. "I know everything." Mallory's face drained of color. Logan rose from his chair, trying to intercept. "Wait, Sophie, it's not." Sophie turned her back on him. "You two deserve each other," she said. Then she walked off the stage, her shoulders straight, her hands trembling only slightly. Mallory stood rooted, eyes locked on me. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just watched the world crumble around her. She found me later in the parking lot. "You knew," she said, her voice hoarse. "You planned this." I turned to face her. "Yes." Tears welled in her eyes. "How long?" "Since the wedding." She blinked. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because I wanted you to feel what I felt. To know what it's like to be humiliated in front of everyone you know. To see something perfect fall apart." She reached out. "Please, just talk to me. We can fix this." I stepped back. "You can lie to yourself if you want, but you can't lie to me anymore." Then I got in the car and drove away. The aftermath unfolded like a slow-motion collapse. No fiery explosion, no screaming matches, just the crumbling of a carefully constructed world, brick by brick. And I was there to watch it fall. For the next few days, the silence between Mallory and me wasn't the Cold War I expected. It was worse. It was emptiness. No shouting, no apologies. Just hollow exchanges and distant eyes. We became strangers sharing a roof. She didn't beg. Not right away. I think part of her still believed this could be patched over, that our life together had enough momentum to carry us through one betrayal. She didn't know me at all. On Wednesday morning, I left a single envelope on the kitchen table. Inside was a copy of the lease, her name removed, her access to our joint account revoked, a note stating she had 30 days to vacate. No discussion, just ink and intention. She didn't touch it until after I'd left for work. That evening, I came home to find her sitting in the dark, the envelope in her lap, her face drawn. "I thought you'd yell," she said quietly. I dropped my keys in the bowl by the door. "No point. I made a mistake. You made a choice," I corrected, cutting her off. Over and over again. Her jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. She reached for something beside her on the couch, a photograph. Our wedding photo. She held it like it burned her fingers. "I don't know why I did it," she whispered. "You do," I said. "You just don't want to admit it." She didn't respond. I walked past her, up the stairs, and shut the bedroom door behind me. 3 days later, I got a call from Sophie. "I need a favor," she said. Her voice was steady, but I could hear the tension beneath it. "Anything. I want to talk. In person." We met that afternoon at a quiet cafe across town. One of those little places that only locals know about. Brick walls, crooked tables, the smell of old coffee grounds in the air. Sophie looked different. Sharper. Like someone who had shed the last bit of softness they could afford. She slid a folder across the table. Inside were screenshots, emails, receipts. Some were from Logan. Some were from Mallory. "I did some digging," she said. "They've been seeing each other for months. Since before the wedding planning started." My stomach twisted. "I'm not telling you to hurt you," she added. "I figured you deserved to know the full extent." "Thank you," I said, folding the folder shut. She hesitated, then looked me dead in the eye. "I want to ruin him." "Logan." I nodded. "What do you have in mind?" Logan wasn't just a sleaze. He was an executive recruiter, a big-name consultant for a private firm that catered to high-end companies. His client list included law firms, medical groups, and venture capitalists. His brand was trust, discretion, reliability. We were going to poison that well. Sophie had the access. She still had admin privileges to the shared drives Logan used to coordinate contracts, left over from the weeks she'd helped him design his client tracking system. All I had to do was stitch the pieces together. Screenshots of inappropriate messages he sent Mallory while working late. Metadata showing he uploaded non-work documents to shared client folders, photos, explicit chats. Payment records from a hotel chain, one of which coincided with a weekend he claimed to be on-site with a tech client. The receipts didn't lie. I packaged everything in a neat little file titled, "Regarding your consultant, urgent." And then I created an email template. Each recipient would get the same message. "A matter has come to light involving your representative, Logan M. I believe you deserve to see this." Attached, the file. Signed anonymously. Sophie pulled the trigger. It took less than 12 hours for the fallout to begin. By Monday morning, Logan had been suspended from his firm. By Wednesday, 3 of his top clients had pulled their contracts. By Friday, his LinkedIn profile had been deactivated. I saw his name trending, just briefly, on a small industry forum. "Consultants' inappropriate behavior leads to contract losses." No explicit details, just whispers. Just enough to stain his credibility forever. Sophie and I never spoke of it again. Revenge is rarely clean. It doesn't heal you, but it does quiet the noise. Meanwhile, Mallory tried. Subtly at first, lingering in the kitchen a few minutes longer, asking about my day. Then with more desperation, texts asking if I wanted to talk. A card left on my pillow one night with a handwritten note. "I'm sorry for everything. I still love you." I didn't respond. The house felt like a graveyard. Each room a memorial to something dead. I began sleeping in the guest room. She stayed on the other side of the house, never crossing the invisible line we both knew was there. Then, one night, I came home late to find her crying on the back porch. "I don't know how I became this person," she said, barely above a whisper. "I look in the mirror and I don't recognize anything." I stood in the doorway, unmoved. You chose this, I said. Her eyes searched mine for something. Anger, forgiveness, maybe even hatred. But I had nothing left to give her. I'll be gone by the end of the week, she said, wiping her face. I'll stay with my sister until I figure things out. I nodded. She left without fanfare. No dramatic scene. Just a single suitcase and the sound of a door closing behind her. 3 weeks passed. And then the invitation arrived. Sophie was hosting a charity gala, an event her family sponsored annually, but had taken a break from during the wedding. She was bringing it back. Big. Public. And with a new name on the host committee. Mine. I almost laughed when I saw it. Beneath the gold-embossed script was a line in Sophie's handwriting. Consider it a celebration of truth. I RSVP'd yes. The night of the gala, I wore a dark suit. Sophie met me at the entrance, dressed in silver, radiating a kind of confidence that hadn't been there before. Ready? She asked. I nodded. The event was everything she promised. Press, music, high-profile guests. And just before the auction began, Sophie took the stage for a brief speech. I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight, she said. This evening isn't just about raising money. It's about recognizing what matters, integrity, resilience, and starting over. She looked out at the crowd, her eyes briefly catching mine. We all carry scars. Some visible, some not. But tonight, we wear them proudly. Applause erupted. Not thunderous, but real. And in that moment, I realized something. I didn't feel broken anymore. I felt awake. Outside, after the gala, Sophie and I stood beneath the canopy of lights strung over the courtyard. Do you regret any of it? She asked. I thought for a moment. No, I said. Not anymore. She smiled. Me neither. We stood there a moment longer, two people once shattered by the same betrayal, now bound by something new. Not love. Not yet. But something better. Understanding. Or so I thought. Because the next morning, a message lit up my phone. Blocked number. No contact. Just 5 words. You don't know everything yet. And beneath it, a photo of Mallory, holding a small blue test with 2 pink lines. The photo stared at me like a ghost. 2 soft pink lines glowing on a plastic test. Mallory's fingers curled around it like she was holding a secret in her hands. Pregnant. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, trying to steady the sudden rush of blood behind my eyes. The message, and signed, from a blocked number, was the only thing on the screen, but it said everything. You don't know everything yet. I didn't need a signature to know where it came from. Only one person would think this was news worth sharing in such a way. And only one would think it was leverage. Mallory. I didn't call her. I didn't reply. Instead, I stared at that photo for 10 long minutes, letting the weight of it settle around me like ash. My thoughts splintered in 1,000 directions. Was she lying? Was it a ploy? A test from weeks ago she decided to recycle in desperation? But the date on the test packaging in the photo was current. And I recognized her sweater sleeve, navy with tiny pearl buttons. She wore it last week. This wasn't ancient history. It was now. That evening, I sat in my car outside the apartment she'd moved into. A modest complex just outside the city, where rent was just low enough for someone rebuilding a life alone. She opened the door before I knocked. She'd seen me through the peephole. Her face was drawn, makeup free, eyes puffy like she'd been crying. She didn't look surprised. Come in, she said softly. I didn't sit. I stood in the middle of the living room while she perched on the edge of the couch, hands folded in her lap like a schoolgirl about to confess. I didn't send the photo to manipulate you, she said, not meeting my eyes. I didn't know what else to do. You could have called. Said the words out loud. I replied. But you went for drama. An anonymous message? That's not how people who want trust operate. She nodded slowly. I'm sorry. I panicked. I stayed silent. I found out 3 days ago, she continued. It wasn't planned. And before you ask, I don't know. Don't say it. She looked up. Don't say you don't know who the father is. Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't flinch. I felt like a stone, hard, unmoving, cold. Have you told him? I asked. She shook her head. Do you plan to? I don't know, she whispered. He's gone. After everything came out, he left the firm, disappeared from social media. He hasn't answered my texts. I gave a bitter laugh. Perfect timing. She looked up at me, pleading now. I don't expect anything from you, she said. Not help. Not forgiveness. I just thought you deserved to know. And what do you plan to do? I asked. Her voice cracked. I don't know yet. But whatever it is, I'll do it alone. For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of her refrigerator in the next room. Then I turned and walked toward the door. She didn't stop me. Outside, the sky had turned a deep, quiet gray. Rain was threatening, and the wind pushed against me like it knew I wasn't ready for what came next. The storm didn't hit until I was halfway home. Sheets of rain slashed across the windshield, and still I drove, vision blurred by more than water. Pregnant, with a child that might not be mine. Or worse, one that was. The next morning, I called the lab I'd used before for the DNA kits. Explained the situation. They couldn't test a fetus until birth unless we did invasive procedures Mallory hadn't even considered yet. But once the baby arrived, testing would be definitive. I agreed. Told them I'd be in touch again when the time came. And that's when it hit me. Time. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It wasn't about drama at a brunch or a severed marriage. This was about something bigger. This was about a child. And I had a decision to make. Over the next few weeks, I kept my distance. Mallory didn't reach out again. Sophie did twice. Once to ask how I was holding up, and once to invite me to another event, a quieter one this time. Dinner with a few close friends. I declined both. Not because I didn't want to see her, but because I was still navigating the debris field of my own wreckage. Then, one Thursday evening, I found myself outside the courthouse. I'd been driving aimlessly, and somehow my hands had led me here. I walked up the stone steps with a folder in my hand and filed the divorce papers myself. No lawyers. No drama. Just clean lines. Mallory didn't contest it. She signed her part and mailed it back without fanfare. A week later, the court issued the final decree. Just like that, it was done. 3 years of marriage reduced to documents and ink. But the chapter wasn't fully closed. Because one morning, 4 months later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Hello. I answered. A nurse's voice came through the line. Mr. Carter? This is from St. Vincent's Maternity. I'm calling on behalf of Mallory Whitman. She listed you as an emergency contact. I felt my breath catch. She went into early labor. The nurse continued. She's stable now, and the baby has been delivered. She's asking if you'll come. I sat there, frozen. You don't have to, the nurse added gently. But she's asking for you. I don't remember the drive. Only that I arrived. She was in a pale hospital gown, tubes in her arms, her face pale and exhausted. But her eyes, they were clear, softer than I remembered. And in her arms, wrapped in a tiny striped blanket, was a baby girl. My chest tightened. She's healthy, Mallory whispered. 7 pounds, 4 ounces. I didn't say anything. Mallory looked down at the baby. Her name is Eliza. She has your nose, I heard myself say. She smiled faintly. I know. Then she looked up. You can test her. I won't stop you. I need you to know the truth. I nodded. And a week later, I got it. The baby was mine. I don't know how to describe what I felt when I read the report. Grief, joy, rage, guilt, relief. It all hit at once. This child, born of betrayal, was mine. Not Logan's. Not a mistake. Not a maybe. Mine. And suddenly, the war I had been waging against the past didn't matter anymore. Because my future was wrapped in pink cotton, with tiny fists and half-lidded eyes. Mallory and I never got back together. I didn't forget, and I didn't forgive, but I didn't shut her out completely either. We became something new, co-parents, forced into a fragile truce for the sake of someone who didn't ask to be born into this chaos. We exchanged texts, schedules, pediatrician visits. No longer lovers. Not enemies. Just 2 people navigating a storm they had both helped create. It's been 2 years now. Eliza is walking, talking, smiling in ways that melt me and scare me all at once. Mallory remarried quietly. A man from her office. Stable. Quiet. I wish them peace. Sophie and I, we stayed in touch. Occasionally. A coffee here. A birthday text there. But that chapter never reopened. We shared a bond born in fire, but fire doesn't make for a safe foundation. And me? I'm still here. Still standing. Not because I didn't break, but because I learned how to rebuild. In the end, the revenge wasn't the victory. Eliza was. And sometimes, the deepest retribution is simply living better.